El Salvador's prison system stands as a stark symbol of the country's long and brutal battle against gang violence. For decades, the nation has struggled with some of the highest homicide rates in the world, largely driven by the activities of powerful gangs. These gangs, such as MS-13 and Barrio 18, have entrenched themselves deeply within the fabric of Salvadoran society, making the fight against them a daunting task. Known for its harsh conditions and overcrowding, the system houses tens of thousands of inmates, often crammed into facilities designed to hold far fewer people. The overcrowding has led to dire living conditions, with inmates lacking basic necessities such as adequate food, clean water, and medical care. This has created a breeding ground for disease and violence, exacerbating the already tense atmosphere within the prisons. Many of these inmates belong to powerful gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18. Inside the prison walls, these gangs continue to operate, maintaining their hierarchies and exerting control over other inmates. The prisons have, in many ways, become microcosms of the gang-dominated neighborhoods outside, with violence and extortion being commonplace. In recent years, the government has implemented a series of controversial measures aimed at dismantling these criminal organizations. These measures include mass arrests, increased sentences, and the construction of new, high-security prison facilities. While these actions have been praised by some as necessary steps to restore order, they have also been criticized for their heavy-handedness and potential human rights violations. These policies have sparked both praise and condemnation from the international community. Human rights organizations have raised concerns about the treatment of inmates and the conditions within the prisons, arguing that the government's approach may be doing more harm than good. On the other hand, some argue that drastic measures are necessary to combat the pervasive influence of gangs and restore safety to the streets of El Salvador. This essay will delve into the complexities of El Salvador's prison system, examining its history, the challenges it faces, and the various reforms that have been attempted over the years. From its origins in the early 20th century to the present day, the prison system has undergone numerous changes, each reflecting the broader social and political dynamics of the country. We will also explore the government's ongoing efforts to combat gang influence within the prisons, including initiatives aimed at rehabilitation and reintegration of inmates into society. Despite the many challenges, there are glimmers of hope, with some programs showing promise in breaking the cycle of violence and offering a path to a more peaceful future for El Salvador. El Tsunami, officially known as the CECOT Maximum Security Prison, opened its doors in 2004 as a symbol of El Salvador's commitment to tackling its growing gang problem. Built to house some of the country's most dangerous criminals, the prison quickly became synonymous with overcrowding and violence. Designed to hold 1,500 inmates, El Tsunami quickly surpassed its capacity, with thousands more crammed into its cells. The prison became a breeding ground for gang recruitment and criminal activity, further fueling the cycle of violence plaguing El Salvador. Life inside El Tsunami and other Salvadoran prisons is marked by deprivation and despair. Inmates face severe overcrowding, with some cells designed for 30 holding over 100 men. Basic necessities like food, clean water, and medical care are scarce, leading to rampant disease and malnutrition. Violence is a constant threat, with little to no protection from guards or prison authorities. Inmates, many of whom have not been convicted of any crime, endure inhumane living conditions that violate their fundamental human rights. The grip of gangs, a shadow government. Within the walls of El Salvador's prisons, gangs hold significant power, often dictating the terms of daily life. These gangs have created a parallel system of governance, where their rules and orders supersede those of the official authorities. The prison yards, often bustling with activity, are microcosms of the gang-dominated world. Here, gang members socialize, strategize, and even recruit new members, all under the watchful eyes of their leaders. Gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18 operate sophisticated networks within the prison system, controlling everything from the flow of drugs and weapons to the allocation of basic necessities. These networks are highly organized, with a clear hierarchy and division of labor. Contraband, including drugs and weapons, is smuggled in through various ingenious methods, often with the help of corrupt officials. The control over these resources gives the gangs immense power over other inmates who must comply with their demands to survive. They enforce their own brutal code of conduct, meting out punishments and even executions with impunity. Discipline is maintained through fear and violence, with gang leaders acting as judge, jury, and executioner. Inmates who disobey or challenge the gang's authority face severe consequences, ranging from beatings to death. This reign of terror ensures that the gang's control remains unchallenged, creating an environment where the rule of law is replaced by the rule of the gang. The government's control over these institutions is tenuous at best, with many guards either complicit in gang activities or too afraid to intervene. The pervasive influence of the gangs extends beyond the prison walls, affecting the lives of the guards and their families. Some guards turn a blind eye to the gang's activities out of fear for their own safety, while others are actively involved in facilitating the gang's operations. This complicity and fear undermine any efforts to restore order and assert governmental control, leaving the prisons firmly in the grip of the gangs. Fighting fire with fire, the government's crackdown. In recent years, the Salvadoran government, under the leadership of President Nayib Bukele, has adopted an increasingly aggressive approach to combating gang violence, both inside and outside prison walls. In 2022, Bukele declared a state of emergency, granting security forces sweeping powers to arrest suspected gang members and hold them without charge. This controversial measure has resulted in the mass incarceration of tens of thousands of individuals, many of whom have no proven ties to criminal activity. Fortresses of surveillance. Modern security measures. To further tighten its grip on the prison system, the government has invested heavily in modern security measures. High-tech surveillance systems, including facial recognition software, and thousands of CCTV cameras, have been installed in prisons across the country. Cell phone signals are often jammed to prevent communication between inmates and outside criminal networks. These measures, while intended to disrupt gang operations, have also raised concerns about inmate privacy and the potential for abuse of power. A cry for justice, human rights concerns, and the search for solutions. The Salvadoran government's heavy-handed tactics have drawn sharp criticism from human rights organizations, who argue that they violate international law and fail to address the root causes of gang violence. These organizations emphasize that the government's approach, which often involves mass arrests and aggressive policing, does not tackle the underlying social and economic issues that fuel gang membership. Human rights advocates argue that without addressing poverty, lack of education, and limited job opportunities, the cycle of violence will continue. They call for comprehensive reforms that include social programs aimed at prevention and rehabilitation rather than solely focusing on punitive measures. Concerns have been raised about arbitrary arrests, due process violations, and the use of torture against detainees. Reports indicate that many individuals are detained without sufficient evidence, and their rights to a fair trial are often ignored. The use of torture and other inhumane treatment during interrogations has been documented, raising alarms among international human rights bodies. These practices not only violate basic human rights, but also undermine the credibility of the justice system. The lack of transparency surrounding prison conditions, and the government's refusal to allow independent monitoring further fuel these concerns. Overcrowded and unsanitary conditions in prisons exacerbate the suffering of detainees and contribute to the spread of diseases. Journalists and human rights observers are often denied access to detention facilities, making it difficult to assess the true extent of the abuses. This lack of oversight allows violations to continue unchecked and erodes public trust in the authorities. Finding a sustainable solution to El Salvador's gang problem will require a multifaceted approach that prioritizes both security and human rights. This includes investing in community-based initiatives, education, and job creation programs that offer alternatives to gang life. Only by addressing the root causes of violence and ensuring respect for human rights can lasting peace and security be achieved.